that's where we see the real amazing connections are coming. So, but you need someone who's meeting you where you're at. To me, is someone who can really understand what it's like to walk in the shoes that you are. They don't have to be in the same area, but they've got a sense of of what that's about.
Welcome to the Funny in Failure podcast, a podcast that celebrates failure and shines the light on the emotional side of comedy, with yours truly, Michael Kahan.
Today's episode really caught me by surprise. I knew Luke was a great speaker and listener, but to have this chat in person was a great pleasure. I think it was the first one of the year and it's amazing. Luke is extremely articulate, passionate, empathetic and caring. Plus he's just such an all-rounded human with a huge passion for excellent leadership, which is contagious. I particularly enjoyed Luke's mindset around growth, plus his ideas on a sharing economy. This concept or idea is profound and is something I've been reflecting on ever since our discussion. So let's get into it and introduce today's guest. Luke Darcy can do it all. He's a former Australian rules footballer who played with the Western Bulldogs. He's also a radio host, a media commentator on both TV and radio, as well as the host of House of Wellness. He's worked with Eddie McGuire on Triple M Radio, commentated on and hosted various TV shows, such as Channel 7's AFL coverage, Talking Footy, 10's AFL coverage, 1 Week at a Time, the Fifth Quarter, the ANZ Netball Championships, and the 2010 Commonwealth Games in Delhi. And if that's not enough, he's also been a regular voice on radio both on SCN, 1116, and 3AW. But wait, there's more. As an AFL player, he captained the Western Bulldogs, where he won a plethora of awards such as an MVP, Best and Fairest, All-Australian, and Leading Goal Kicker Award for the Western Bulldogs. His regular hosting of House of Wellness helps people live, look, and feel well. He also hosts the incredible podcast Empowering Leaders with Luke Darcy, and he's also the Director of Innovation and Partnerships at Aleda, which we get into and discuss in the podcast. Just as a heads up, you don't need to be a sports lover or even care about AFL, and that's the Australian Football League, to enjoy this chat. It's always interesting to hear from a top athlete about his experiences of being one of the best, plus hearing about his experiences around confidence, great leadership, navigating injuries, and mental health. For the first few minutes, we talk about a pretty big football scandal which rocked the AFL world and also aspects of Australia. Essentially, the focus was around whether players, management, or the powers to be from the Essendon Football Club knew if they were giving illegal and potentially performance-enhancing drugs to their players. Luke mentions how he interviewed one of the so-called masterminds around the story and his overall role in the saga. Luke and I briefly discuss it, but Luke skillfully keeps it focused on the emotional element of the story, including the lack of empathy applied to the players and the staff as the story unfolded. Luke is a deep thinker, and so we also get into mindfulness and holistic health, Luke being a meme, his transition from professional sports, Shane Warne, sharing economy, feedback, ego, and his passion for body awareness. Before we get into this chat, in case you aren't aware, the videos are now available on YouTube under Michael Kahan. That's Kahan with a K, unless you're listening to it already. I find it adds a new element and dynamic to these chats. I'll still be posting snippets of these chats on Instagram under Funny and Failure, so check them out if you want to stay in the loop for upcoming episodes, or you want to ask a guest a question. I'd also love it if you would share the podcast or share your takeaways from the chat. It really motivates me, helps the podcast grow, and ensures I can lock in amazing guests like this one. And just as a final reminder, the podcast comes out every Monday at 5 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, with the video to follow the following day. Anyway, sit back, relax, and enjoy today's epic episode. So I know you're a bit of a meme, if you know what I'm talking about. Can you say this out loud?
Say that again.
Yep. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
That's an interesting way to kick things off. It's an interesting backstory that I actually haven't probably told properly in some ways, is that that was right in the middle of the Essendon drug saga, as it's been called, and I work in the AFL. I was at Channel 7 broadcasting the AFL, and I was doing breakfast radio on a high-profile breakfast show in Melbourne. And so that story, whether you liked it or not, was just a daily occurrence. You're an Essendon supporter, so you understand what that's like. And from my point of view, I just have great empathy in the industry. They're people that I played with and against. And for me, I'm not a journalist that's telling stories as much. And so because you're doing breakfast radio, you're involved in it, you're going to comment on it at various times. But I got this call, I'm trying to think of the timing of it, and Lewis Martin, who runs Channel 7, said, mate, we've got this big interview, and there are a lot of those people that everyone wanted to speak to. Yeah. And so he said, mate, we want you to do it. And I said, oh, okay, who am I interviewing? He said, I can't tell you. And I was like, that's pretty hard, mate, to prepare. He said, no, it's so delicate, but it's the Channel 7 Sunday night team who are preparing this. Their equivalent of 60 minutes, and we think you're the right person to do it. So, just start getting your head around the Essendon story. And I was like, well, can I have some more detail? No, but it could happen in the next sort of 24, 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
So, in my mind, I thought, I'm interviewing James Hird because I'd done some charity stuff with Hirdy in the past. We played against each other. I thought maybe he's going to be more comfortable with a current player doing that interview, or an ex-player, sorry, I should say, an ex-player than a journo. And so that was sort of where my mind, and I sort of half forgot about it, but I was doing the footy down at Geelong on a Saturday night. I get this call at half-time of the footy. I'm at GMHBA Stadium or whatever it's called. Mate, you're on. Post the game, you're on, and you need to drive to the Torquay Country Club, and and you've got this interview. You're interviewing the weapon, Dean Robinson. So my mind's going, gee, and then you're normally working with production crew and footy, that you've got long-term relationships, you know how they work, but I'm in front of this group and they're serious journos, those guys, and so they've got a legal team briefing, and there's all of the substances, that are really specific around what you could say, what you couldn't. And so
on your end or his end? My
end and his end as well. So, but you also, when you do something like that and you realise, hey, this is incredibly sensitive, you want to make sure that you're across it. So I'm a preparer. I've got, suddenly 10 hours to just sit there and cram through information. And next thing you know, it's a 3-camera shoot. Sitting on the other chair is Dean Robinson. I've never met before in my life. And I've got this production team sitting there, and this is their story, so you talk about being out of your comfort zone. You're wanting to, and look, as those things are produced in mainstream media, often there's an angle that's coming from, and unbeknownst to me, on the green screen was a big picture of James Hird's face,
Interesting.
So in post-production, a lot of that was engineered towards James Hird. And so that question, they were sort of instructing me, hey, you're not calling the footy, mate. Keep it brief. Just, we want you to ask, really short questions. And so in that spotlight, I think he said to me something like, we had black ops in a black ops department. And I looked at him and went, say that again? And so, like anything in life, people say that back to me a lot, Michael, as it turns out. Say that again as, as you said, I didn't realise I wasn't mean, but apparently I am.
Yep. That's fantastic. That's a great story. There was a lot there. Do you take that as a badge of honour?
Oh, look, I take it as lucky to get through it without something more, unfortunate happening, really, because, I look back and think, first and foremost, I love the industry I've worked in. I felt, as I said, a lot of empathy through that time. An adjunct to that, I think James Hird was pretty upset about that. I get the feeling. I bump into him from time to time, and it was a really tough time for a lot of people in the industry, including him. And I had genuine empathy for a lot of those guys going through it. So it was probably not my style of what I signed on to in media, to do a current affairs style interview. So it was one of those things that you look back, I don't regret it.
Yep.
I wouldn't change it at all. But, there was a bit of degree of difficulty there that I probably didn't understand at the time.
It's very interesting that they have a model like that. Did you know what you're getting into when you were there, or did you realise you're picking up things like with sound bites? Because a show like that is about sound bites, and sometimes, I'm not saying it happened with you, you ask a question and they'll put a different answer. And things.
In fairness, we interviewed Dean Robinson, and then over a couple of days that I interviewed him on a couple of different locations, and I think the sensitivity around it, they were so concerned that he was going to pull out at any time. It was so delicate.
Yep.
They didn't want to let anyone know, or if not, someone else was going to get the story. So I think that's why I don't think they were trying to keep me in the dark necessarily, but they had this window. They thought it was a big story. You know, for whatever reason, they chose me. But yeah, you do an interview over 12. I found him to be really intelligent, a really nice guy. Again, I had empathy for his situation as well at the time, but you condense that down to however many minutes of television, 25 minutes of television, you're right. You can't help but feel as though, why did they leave that part out? That was the part I found most interesting. It didn't make the cut.
Yeah, there's a lot of criticism about the model, but it would be interesting if they ever did like a full cut version, because I've seen like controversial figures go on like Current Affairs and they secretly record themselves and then they see a completely different version or like adjusted, and it's interesting. I think you did the best that you could in this situation, but I wouldn't want to be on it. I wouldn't want to be him.
Certainly didn't put my hand up for another one.
So for the non-Australians, we won't get into that whole saga because that's something that's been going on for a while. What was your kind of takeaway from speaking to someone like him about the whole situation?
My takeaway was that, it's a competitive environment. For those that don't understand, and it's funny, when you travel overseas and people ask you, what did you do for a living? And you say Australian rules football, you still get the blankest of blank. It's soccer, isn't it? No, it's rugby. No, not either one of those. It's what? It's that crazy game without headgear is the best you can sort of come up with. And so it's always been a hard thing to try and describe. But if you look at world sport and you see the size of the crowds per population, you see the way that it's engineered with the draft and with the salary cap, it's it really punches above its weight. I think I'm biased on a world sporting standard for the game. I love the game. I still love it. I still think it's the best game in the world. So you're in a competitive environment in an indigenous sport effectively. So you're always looking for advantage. There's degrees of, whether it's an ice bath or a new protein drink. I mean, everyone's looking for an advantage. Do I think in the era that a team set out to cheat or do anything? Absolutely not. I don't have that part of me. And do I think someone in the past did? Maybe I'm naive. Maybe I've got this holistic view of our sport. But from all the evidence I saw, I don't think that was the case. If you look back and thought, is it a good thing, that we're doing, injections off-site, in different locations? That's probably not ideal. Does that mean that you've done something wrong? I still don't know. I think, I hope more that the individuals that were concerned, that really there was a lot of people I think that were fairly innocent bystanders in that who had a horrific time, and I think that to me is a bit disappointing.
Yeah, especially how they were treated afterwards by everyone as well. I found that, especially as an Essendon supporter, you don't know what's going on. There's different reports. Hopefully the truth will come out. Who knows? Hopefully everyone's kind of moved on and they feel okay about that, but the trauma there would be horrific. But also from that meme side, transitioning from AFL, there's so much I can say about this. I hear that a lot of AFL players find it really hard once they've left the AFL system, maybe going to like a desk job or, just a struggle because there's a lot of play and fun. You were one of the, I wouldn't say lucky ones, you earned it, but you transitioned into media. So when you become like a meme or say that again, it kind of shows that my take is that you are quite good in the industry and that people are talking about it. It's like a badge of honor.
Look, I didn't necessarily see it that way. I think, when I started playing, I really wanted from a young age to work in the media. My dad used to broadcast sport growing up as a kid, so I had this idea that I was going to call the game, even from the first year or two that I played. So transitioning into that, I saw that as a career progression.
Yep.
When I did my knee in 2005, it was the third last year I played, as it turned out, I worked full-time, semi-full-time on the coverage for Channel 10, which was controversial at that stage because current players didn't do it. There was a bit of backlash. You're being selfish. Who do you think you are? We know every week now, current players, we're desperate to get them on the broadcast that I still work on. So, I don't feel like suddenly I'm not part of the meme generation. So it wasn't like, geez, that's the moment where you finally made it. I think I look back and feel really fortunate. Turned 47 a few weeks ago. From the age of 17, I've been full-time employed effectively in the game and the industry that I love. So I might look back and think, how lucky are you that the game has been so good to you?
I've heard you previously talk about like luck and gratitude, and that's something we'll talk about in a sec. But I would imagine you've been dominant in your era as a football player, and now you've transitioned into something. Yes, it's still football, but it's a different skill set. And I think I heard you on another podcast talk that used to call games, but I'm sure it would have been a little bit daunting, or maybe you're lacking confidence in a sense. Was it an easy transition for you? Did you just kind of get it?
Well, no, it never is it? It never is. And even though you think you're prepared and you want to do something, you step up to the plate for the first time.
Yeah.
I can remember an opportunity came pretty early on to call with the Triple M commentary team. I was only a couple of years out of the game, and Brian Taylor had left, had been a long part of Triple M and went to 3RW, and it opened up this little gap, and it was Gary Lyon and James Brayshaw. Sam Newman was still in the commentary, Jason Dunstall. These at the time were as high-profile guys in the industry, and I'm 2 years out, and I'm stepping into a pretty robust environment, and they'd been the ones that had heard me doing a very off-Broadway game. I flew myself over to Perth for SEN and called a WA game. It was Fremantle playing Melbourne. Total audience listening to that would have been 10 people, but it happened. 5 of those people were those guys driving back from a Sportsman's Day they'd done. They wanted to get the score on the Melbourne game. Gary Lyons looking for the score, and I think they switched over and found this call, and they go, "Who's that? Who's that calling that?" And they went, it's Darcy. It's a small industry, people, and I think somewhere in their mind they thought he could do it. But I remember that first game at the MCG with those guys. I'm in the car park. I almost had to coach myself to get out of the car because I thought, okay, it's on here now. There's no hiding. You're in this environment, and, whatever you do, don't muck this one up.
That's very interesting. And you would have had a lot of training as a football player to maybe psych yourself up or to deal with the highs and the lows. Did you apply that when you're in the car trying to get out?
And I think it happens every time you do something new, even if, I've been doing it for a long while now, over 15 years. But anytime someone says to you, hey, here's a new go and host a show for the first time, the heart rate immediately goes to the next level. I had this, when I was doing breakfast radio, I got another call from Channel 7, will you come and fill in for the news? Tim Watson's going on holidays. We'd like you to read the news for 2 weeks. Now, on the surface, you think, I've done lots of live TV at that stage. We're hosting breakfast radio every morning. It can't be that hard to read the auto cue on the news. But in the week leading up, my co-host on radio, Mick Malloy, as is his sense of humour, started to say, geez, I've got a bad feeling about this. I just got a really bad feeling.
Wow.
I feel like this could be a career ender for you. And he started this sort of campaign the week leading up. We started taking talkback callers on newsreaders that have the greatest bloopers ever in news reading history. And these stories just got bigger and bigger and bigger as the week led up. There's a legendary story apparently of a Channel 10 newsreader who'd been sitting there waiting for his moment for 10 years. Had been rehearsing for 10 years. The newsreader gets sick and they go, Michael, you're on. You're in the chair. And his days got there and he got sat down and they count you back in. Right, going live in 20, 19, 18. Gets to 10. He goes, abort, pulls the earpiece out, runs out of the studio and no one's ever seen him again. And so all I could think of that day, first night, that was just, I had that image in my head. All I could hear in my mind was going, abort, get out of the chair. So the heart rate was certainly up on that occasion as well.
I'm sure Mick has maybe changed his tactics since then to get you psyched up. And in terms of speaking publicly, because, you hear the stereotypical, like when a football player is interviewed, they're like, yeah, the boys did well, the boys, all of that stuff. And I don't know if you're taught or football players are taught to answer questions a certain way. Now you're on kind of the other end and you have to reveal your opinions, and if you maybe have a bad opinion, you're going to be destroyed by the trolls. Have you had experiences with that, and how do you kind of cope?
Probably exist in a bit of a bubble where, firstly, my sense of humour is that's funny, like you're going to make mistakes. What is a little bit more extreme now is this sort of cancel culture thing where, touch wood, you legitimately made a mistake and something came. Doesn't feel like we've got any margin for error in that anymore, and that
scary.
Sucks the life out of broadcasting in some ways. Everyone's so risk averse now that you're trying to have some fun at the humour. And now clearly, You know, if you say something that crosses a line intentionally and you're a recidivist in doing that, there's no place for you. Yep. But I feel like it's become so extreme now that we're just hanging off every word, or, you know, a wrong pause at the wrong time, and you're going to get... Look, I have had no existence in the social media world, so I don't really, up until very recently, so I don't tend to hear it or read it. I get told it occasionally. Most of the time I find it pretty funny. So
that's great.
I don't have too many problems.
I've got a friend. I don't even know how to explain this guy. He's got probably 1 million followers on Instagram and on YouTube and TikTok, Darren Levy. And he does very funny content, but the comments he gets, 99% of them are amazing. But some are like, someone will just bag you or whatever. He finds it hilarious, but he's getting... Think about it, 1 million, I don't know what percentage of them are comments. He's getting so much of them, but he finds it hilarious. So he actually came here and we read all of his nasty comments and he just laughed them off. But still, it's pretty hard. And maybe when you're a football player, I know that we didn't quite have social media like that, but maybe there's a front page on The Age and there's an article that you didn't play well or something like that. How did you kind of cope with that?
I think when it comes from respected and trusted sources, you know, that's always challenging, and often, you know, when it was delivered that way, when you took some time to reflect, if it was accurate, you just had to wear it, you know. And I played a lot of average games, so I had my fair share of feedback on that front. I think in the era that I played, they're the most feedback driven environments that you could possibly imagine, because from week to week you're reviewing how you train, how you perform, and so you get feedback from your teammates, you get feedback from your coaches, you get feedback everywhere. And I think that's one of the challenges AFL players often find. You leave that environment and you start working in media and you go, how did I go? And everyone goes, well, you'll know if we get a call back, and that'll be the only time, and if you don't, you probably didn't go that well. So I think those of us that have come out of sport for a living crave a bit more of that food. Having said that, I've got 4 kids. You know, I can see how the genie's out of the bottle now with just this constant barrage of negativity that comes in that space. So I'm a bit alarmed by it. I'm probably just in a spot where, you know, I missed it, or there might be a whole heap of people out there who genuinely hate my guts, who'd be really disappointed that I don't read any of it. Maybe they can send that to you, Michael.
I would appreciate that, and we can do a segment on it. But in terms of feedback, it's very interesting because it is like a different world. Some people, we kind of gave an example off air, but some people are repelled by feedback. They don't want to hear it. Typically in the arts, depending if you're a comedian or whatever, you don't want that. You just, you do your thing. And I know from a screenwriter perspective, I come from an accounting background, that I wanted the most intense feedback. Is this good? Is this bad? Does this work? And people in kind of that space were a bit hesitant to give it to me. But I'm like, how am I going to grow and do this full time or make a living if I'm not getting the feedback? And it's so interesting from 2 different spaces how feedback can be seen potentially as a negative thing. And then where you've been is it's a positive thing. And to kind of like balance that would also be it'd be hard to balance because some people can view it as being rude. I don't know if you've had that experience.
Well, it's interesting. This morning I've just come from a space delivering leadership programs, something I'm really passionate about right at this time of my life, and it always has been a bit of a passion. And so I was just at a media group sitting down with their key execs, and, you know, when it's delivered in the right way and received with a growth mindset without getting 2 Tony Robbins on you here.
Oh, I love him.
Michael, then I think you can't help but see that as a gift, because that's where all the growth is. And so we run programs specifically where we get great leaders together. It's probably where we've crossed over in this space. You know, the podcast I'm recording is all the stories of these, what we think are brilliant leaders in different settings. All of them have that common thread where they constantly seek out and receive and give feedback. That's where the improvement is. That's how you constantly grow. And if you've got a closed mindset and you think, do you know what, I've got all the knowledge I need, then you're going to be a little bit lonely. We think that's where, you know, great leadership is heading, and it's changed. You know, we played in an environment where you didn't get a voice, you didn't get a say. It was very hierarchical. You got yelled at by the coach, you got personally abused, and you coped with it or you didn't. Whereas, you know, we think a much healthier, more productive, better environment is where you collaborate together to achieve better outcomes, and, you know, I'm really passionate about that.
I'm so happy that you're passionate about that. And in terms of the growth mindset, to me, that's the only way forward. Yeah, there's many different avenues and people can call things or have different labels for them. But with the growth mindset, even if you're going through, let's say, a negative experience, with that mindset, it allows you to kind of evaluate it, normally with time, and then you can see the positives and move in a certain direction. I see it as an empowering one where you're not a victim. But it's very easy in this day and age, and I do this all the time, where we can feel like we're a victim. But when you have that growth mindset, it allows you to kind of move forward. I wonder, have you kind of explored that relationship with being a victim and moving forward?
Oh, absolutely. I align with that. I think one of the great gifts is to take responsibility, isn't it? And we talk about in our space at Aleda about leadership starts with self-leadership, and you know, whatever your version of that is, at some point it's that ownership of, if you take responsibility for the actions, then you don't have a victim mentality, and that's where you get the opportunity to try and improve. There's some great examples. Like, you know, radio was this incredible opportunity to meet interesting people, and Shane Warne, I was lucky enough to spend some time with. He was a regular guest on our show, but lucky enough to have a few nights out with the great legendary Shane Warne. Talk about owning your mistakes the second that they happen. That was his superpower for me. Warnie was we loved him more for him. And I think you look at, you know, clearly he was incredible at what he did for his day job. But outside of that, you know, people loved him because he's, you know, whatever shortcomings he had, he owned them straight away. And there was a you know, brilliant example in recent times, the club that I played for. You know, I thought, you know, one of our young superstar players, Bailey Smith, had a challenging time that was very public by nature. But, you know, I've never heard a young person own their mistakes more fully. And when you do, where do you go from there apart from empathy and how do we move on? So, you know, I think it's a good lesson.
I don't want to go into this topic, but it's interesting with our political leaders, for example. This is what's forced me to kind of look at leadership another way. There's a lot of blame, and it's this person's fault or it's this person's fault, and there's no real accountability. But I've been watching other leaders in this space, and I know that you, as you said, very involved. But to hear the ownership of put your hand up, you've made a mistake, and it's just so much easier. It's less, even as someone not involved in the situation, when someone puts their hand up and they owns it, that is so powerful. Doesn't mean we can keep on making mistakes, but I just find that so inspiring, and I think that's the new wave of leadership that is actually coming along.
Yeah, I think so long as it's authentic and you're doing it because you genuinely believe it and you genuinely feel like, you know, I did own that mistake and I want to move on, I think you're probably right without getting super political about it. There's this great fear from, you know, you speak to those guys off air and they speak in a normal language and they can interact in the way that hopefully you and I are now, but you put them on the mic, they're so terrified of a slip-up that they feel like they can't take responsibility. I don't agree with that. I think if you do it properly and authentically, then that is still the best version that our political leaders or any leader can show themselves. And so, you know, never fun at the time. No one likes doing it. You know, you prefer to avoid them if you can, but once it happens, I think it's the only way.
Agreed. And I just think that's the way that we need to communicate authentically as well. In terms of, I've written down like 50,000 points because I know that you're a leadership expert, but we'll just skim through some things. And, you know, leadership's probably been down your throat even before you started footy. So you became the captain of the Western Bulldogs. Did you have to adjust your leadership style? And I'm just going to give a preface to when I was in an accounting firm, we had these motivational experts or speakers, and they said the person you are today is not, and they worded it better than this, is not good enough to succeed to be at the end goal if you want to be a partner. You have to change, you have to adjust in a positive way. And I always found that very interesting because everyone's got flaws or weaknesses or however you want to put it, and we all need to work on ourselves or move in a direction where we can grow and take that opportunity. So I'm wondering from as a player when you're going through the system to then becoming a captain, did you have to change a lot?
Look, I haven't really thought about that too much, but, you know, as I think back now, yeah, I think you're evolving. When you first start in a sporting organisation, and I was coming from a fair way back, when I look back, you're trying to get a game first and foremost. That's you know, how do I make sure that I've got a career? And then once you get to the point where you're a regular and you feel like your eyes sort of lift up a little bit and you go, oh, I certainly was for me. Not only do I want to just get a game, how do I contribute to us being successful? How do I help our teammates? Because the better they are, the better we're going to be. That's the joy of team sport. It's why I love it so much and still do, is that you only succeed when your teammates succeed. And I think those skill sets actually, you know, players in different sports, I think, take to other areas of their life. And then suddenly you're the captain of your club, and that's the ultimate position where, you really want to try and have the maximum impact you can. In reality, though, you can't have an impact still if you're not performing well. So you've got to take care of. There's an element of having to look after that for itself. Like anything, you'd love to attach some of the wisdom as you get older back into your younger self. But I think, if you're trying to be something that you're not, you get found out really quickly. And I had a lot of shortcomings. I still have a lot of shortcomings. But I think probably all the way along, I think the people that know me have probably been close to the best version of myself, which sometimes is very disappointing. But I don't think I've ever tried to be anything else.
Well, I admire that. In terms of the balance, because it's very interesting. As a football player, you're training, it can be the impact on your body can be enormous. There's a lot going on. You're also doing media and there's other things going on. But then you also need to perform as a leader. And I would imagine that balance could be quite difficult.
Yeah, and you've seen examples where great players get leadership positions and it overwhelms them.
Yep.
And I think that advice was first and foremost. If you let that distract from what was enabling you probably to be the captain in the first place, your own routines, your own training, your own diet, your own preparation, then you're really going to be a double negative. We've lost a great player that we had and you're not really influencing in a positive way. So I think that's, and others, you give them that responsibility and it just enhances everything that they do, because it's like, right, okay, I take that responsibility on. And
were you like that?
I felt like it was something that I really wanted to succeed at. 5 games in, I remember saying this conversation to my wife Beck at the time. I was captain for the first year. Rodney Eade had just been made with a new coach. He made me captain. I kicked 5 goals in a quarter the week before. I used to play more ruck, but I went to full forward, kicked 5 goals in a quarter. I got home from that game. We won against the Adelaide Crows. I remember saying to Beck, I never said this out loud before. I said, you know what? I'm going to have a really good time. I just feel like I've got my game to the space where it's almost, this sounds incredibly arrogant. It almost seemed hard for me not to play really, really well. Something bad's got to happen. And I think I allowed myself to say that to her. The next week we went down to Geelong and I do my ACL, and that's a 12-month injury. And then on recovery from that, I tore the graft, which was another 12 months. So I still feel grateful that happened at the end of my career rather than the start of my career. But it certainly came to a screaming halt.
It's very interesting in terms of mindset. We have extreme examples like Michael Jordan, where it's his way or kind of the highway. I believe you don't have that type of leadership style, but in terms of saying to the world, I'm the best, Kobe Bryant, I'm the best player in the world. And so some people can view it as arrogant, but you also need to have that confidence, especially as a professional athlete. So how do you kind of balance that? Because there's nothing wrong with saying you're great at something or you're good at something, or are you leaning towards the more ego?
Well, I think that's the American and Australian difference, isn't it? And there's good and bad in both of it. I mean, you see the self-confidence, and they express that so openly. And no one bats an eyelid in America. In Australia, you do, then everyone goes, what a tool. How did we get to that point where you thought that was okay? Now, I'm not saying one is better than the other. I often think, and I quote this back a lot, Greg Norman is in the news a bit at the moment, who's probably an Australian-American, and probably had more of an American approach as an Australian in terms of his attitude. He was always a super confident guy, but he used to say, like in America, you buy a really nice car, someone walks past and says, hey, great car. In Australia, someone runs their keys down the side of it. And that is a bit of a window into the Australian mentality. I look at some of the great players and great leaders here in Australia. They have got that Michael Jordan's, Kobe Bryant, self-confidence. It's there. It's under the surface. They don't probably express it in the way that those guys did so openly, but don't be fooled that it's not there and the competitiveness doesn't come out. I think they just don't express it the same way. It's fully there, but it's an Australian thing. Now, I'm not sure if it's good or bad.
Yeah, there's nothing worse when someone walks in the room and says you're the best, because that is viewed in such a negative light here, and it's kind of like off-putting. But I like that humble person who knows they're amazing. They probably feel it, but they don't feel the need to outwardly express it.
Well, it certainly aligns with how I was brought up, Mike, and I don't think you can change. I find that hard to change, and I still do, maybe unfairly. You interact with someone who's got a bit of that, and there's a new generation coming through in Australia, I think, that are very much like that, and you get this correspondence sometimes, and have a look at how successful I am, and here's my book, and I'm on fire, and I still sort of go, wow, like it hits you in the face a little bit, but maybe they probably look at us and think, how foolish are you, because you don't tell your story.
Very interesting. It's something I want to be thinking about for a long time, because I've always been very repelled, and It's interesting, the Australian and the American model, because that has come up for me a lot. But in terms of the confidence side, if you show fear either as a football player, probably more as a football player, or even as a commentator or on your radio, people sense it. I know in like comedy, for example, if you're doing stand-up and you show fear, you've lost the audience. So we'll start with football. Did you ever have fear in your eyes? Because I had Matthew Lloyd on, and he said that in his last year or two, he was genuinely afraid, sometimes to even go for a contest. And there are various other components to it. But did you ever have fear, or every time you stepped on the football field, you were 100% confident?
No, fear every week, fear every time you played, and I reference this story. You know, I've coached my kids occasionally in junior footy, and which is a lot of fun. But you know, the great Tony Lockett in our game kicked more goals than anyone, a Hall of Fame legend, and one of the scariest people ever to play the game. If you're on the footy field with Tony Lockett, you genuinely were nervous because, you know, every 6 or 8 weeks he maimed someone for fun. But the guys that played with him tell us he was so nervous pre-game that he used to be physically ill, Plugger. Like he literally would throw up every game out of fear and out of nerves. And I remember thinking, geez, he made a lot of us so nervous. That fascinating to think if he was at that level. And Glenn Archer's one of the bravest players I've played against and was so courageous. But you talk to him, that fear is healthy. I always felt like such a brutal combat sport we play, and you know when you run back with the fly of the ball, that is an unnatural thing to do. You're running into you know there's a chance of horrific injury. If you're not feeling a sense of fear there, then you probably shouldn't be out there. So I definitely had that week in, week out. That never left me.
And did you have any tactics to kind of cope with it?
I think in the end it was this. What was a bigger fear would be that if you couldn't commit yourself to the courage that it took to overcome that, having to front up to your mates and realise that, you know what, that you weren't up for that challenge, that was a bigger fear than the fear of actually getting hurt in the end. So I think in one way you just went, and just like anything, when you train to do it after a while, you just know how to put yourself in those positions. And look, sometimes, you know, everyone has been in a contest. You go, geez, I wish I had gone harder at that contest. I wish I'd have gone back to flight. I pulled out of that contest. I did all of that. But if you do it too often, there's really not a spot for you. And I think you come to terms with that.
Do you get called out from that from Team H and coaches? And
you know, absolutely. And I think of this story a lot too, Michael. There's the scrutiny of the media in our game here in Australia has become intense. I'm part of that. It's employed me for a long period of time, so I'm not being hypocritical. I know that's the case, but I think if you've been out in the field and you played, there was a double-page story in our biggest newspaper here, and it was of a Geelong player, and in frame by frame, they had him going back or not going back with the flight of the ball. And I might be getting this slightly wrong, but the word coward may have been used or close enough to it that the inference was, if you don't go back and put yourself into that, and it was a crazy position they were asking for. And I remember reading that guy. That is out of control. Like, seriously, you speak to the bravest players in the game. Everyone's had one of those moments. To have that in print and your courage question that openly. The next week, one of the Geelong players put himself in a position he should have been in, lost a kidney. And
Lonergan?
Tom Lonergan.
Yep.
And I think that was a direct response to, I don't want to be that person in the paper who's got a photo being under the banner of cowards. So, you know, I think that was getting a bit out of hand.
That can really impact a player or someone, because to put yourself in a position like that, you don't want to die, but you also want to do what's best for the team. So
there's a term we use in sport called dumb courage, and I agree with it. Like, sometimes it's like you don't need to be. The only thing that can happen is you get hurt and your teammate can get hurt, and you're actually no good for the team there. So there are other options.
Oh, interesting.
There are other options, you know, like just that crazy blind running back, you know, and some of the players we admired the most just did that because that was in their DNA. But there are other options. You can put yourself in smarter positions not to show dumb courage.
That is very interesting. I always thought from an outside perspective, I never played football and that won't surprise anyone. But in terms of, you see like players injured and they're getting picked every week. This is probably more so back in the day. And I always thought that was silly, because from a holistic point of view, you want that player to have the longest career possible. But if you're going to pump them up with like painkillers or injections or whatever you guys do depending on the severity of the injury. I always thought it was a little bit barbaric, and please correct me if I'm wrong, where it's just we need this player to play even if he's at 60%. How did you view that? Because I know you come from a holistic background in terms of health now.
Probably more so since I retired. But again, I think it's that mentality that I don't want to let my teammates down. You know, if I've got an injury, I'm not going to succumb to that. And there was this badge of honour. And it's important too, because everyone plays with injuries in sport, and some cope with that better than others. And so, you know, to have players on your team that can carry an injury and still play well, they're like rolled gold, really. So there is but sometimes you need to save players from themselves, and the medical staff need to say, hey, this is not for the long term, for the betterment of you or the team. I think all of us were so short term focused, you only worried about it when you retired.
So when you did your ACL, then I forgot what you said, the other aspect, we were talking about confidence. What did you think your career would look like after? Because you were playing really well. You kicked that bag. You said out loud that you were going to, this game's easy for you.
Yeah, I regret that. No, then it got hard. It got hard, and then with the ACL, they repair the graft. They use a piece of your hamstring to rebuild the ACL. I came back that pre-season, felt better than I'd ever felt. I'm on track here.
Oh, wow, even with that hamstring being...
Yeah, because you know all your times, you know all your pre-season running times, you know all of the physical things you can do. And in the last session before Christmas, I convinced the training staff to let me play this scratch match practice game. And again, I've got the ego going big time here, but I think I kicked 3 or 4 goals in the first sort of 5 minutes back out there. I thought, this is great. I've come back. And so I can still remember this as clear as I am. The head of high performance looked and said, okay, that's enough. I said, just give me one more quarter. Give me one more quarter. I'll go to Christmas. I'll feel good. I've got half a game in the bank. And he sort of rolled his eyes and said, yeah, very next contest, same motion as Geelong. I can hear the rip of the graph and driving into get that confirmed. I knew straight away that was another 12 months. And after that, physically to do what you needed to do to play well, that was gone.
What do you think the lesson there was?
Oh, there's a touch of ego in that, isn't there? There's a touch of, and I think, when you're playing at that level, there's always that, I'd done more than enough to go and have a Christmas break. Stupidity, really. And listen to the fitness staff. Who are you to override them? What a stupid thing to do. There was a bit of immediate regret in all of it. You went, if I had gone to Christmas, could I have got through over the break and come back? But you know what? Life, the title of your, podcast here is about failure. That fast-tracked the next part of my life because I had 2 full years out of the game. I got to work on the next chapter. So as hard as that was, I was able to flip that into, I hope having a good impact on the teammates that I couldn't play with, but hopefully off the field had an impact. But it certainly helped the next part of my life a bit smoother.
I love that. We're talking about growth mindset, and that's exactly what it is. And also, you're not just commentating for yourself, you're also supporting your club as well, bringing publicity, and it's a really interesting, especially because I think you said you were the first in the game. So do you view that as a blessing, doing the 2 ACLs?
Not at the time, far from it at the time. I remember going home and you're really emotional about it, and it's like, God, this dream to win a premiership, all those things, your mind goes through it, and why me? How did that happen? A bit of blame game. I had a fairly interesting conversation with our surgeon, which was out of line from me. I think he said to me at the time, came in and had a high performance, saying, mate, no, it's just a bit of scar tissue. And I'm going, I know 100% I've done it. And then the surgeon takes one look at it, grabs my knee and goes, no, you've done your ACL again. And I said to him, so what are you talking about? And he said, mate, you've torn the graph. And I said, well, so where's your accountability in this? Why, you're the surgeon. What? He goes, mate, it was first time it's ever happened to me. It was always going to happen. You need to get over it. And I was not ready for that statement. I think it probably said something I regret in return. He said, you can't speak to me like that. And he was probably right. But in my mind, it was like, I've done another year's worth of work. I was still captain of the club. This is devastating. But you don't take long to go. Your worst day is someone's best day. I've got these other opportunities to impact, the players that we play with, and you can flick your mindset pretty quickly.
And did you do that?
I think I did. I hope I did. I think you realise that, you're getting – perspective's pretty interesting, isn't it? You go back to train again, you're in the gym, you're working full-time to get fit again, you're getting paid, extremely well, you're in a professional environment. Yeah, you can't play. Yeah, it's devastating, but, I'd been a professional athlete full-time for 12 years at that stage or thereabout. How lucky am I? It doesn't take me long to get my mind into that, and where's the other opportunities to help someone else to learn, to get better, and it would have taken me, some time, but I hope I got there.
Oh, okay. Everyone can use a bit of the Luke mindset because I think that's how we move forward. It changes the world when you see, at the moment it's horrible and there's a lot going on, and I'm sure you are angry and frustrated, all those negative emotions. But with a bit of time to be able to see how there's positives come out of it, I really think that changes the world. It changes you, it changes the person you're speaking to, and it can get someone out of a bit of a slump or a negative mindset when you hear a story like that as well.
And look at what happens if you get to that space, then, inevitably things happen that, I clear this path around wanting to work in the media, you get a call straight away, we know you're out for another year, you come and work with us, you suddenly, as I said, I was at the end of my career anyway, it was coming. It came a lot quicker than I wanted it to, but then I was able to really pursue those things and set me up a bit quicker than I would have if I hadn't have done it.
Do you think you could have played a bit longer? Like, what's the mindset of when you know
Oh, absolutely. No, absolutely. I think, that was a time where I felt physically at its absolute best and felt totally, comfortable and mature enough, and prior to doing the knee, so, yeah, there's always that element of your mind and went, what would it have looked like to have got another 5 years or thereabouts, rather than it coming to such an abrupt halt. But I don't have too many regrets. I look back and think how lucky were you in the start to, from a young age, wanted to play. You're so lucky you did that full time for 14 years and hopefully got the best out of whatever ability you had.
Well, okay. I'm in awe of that. That's amazing. And in terms of the failure side, my very snapshot, one sentence definition of failure, and we can talk about this for probably days, is that it's kind of when you give up. That's a very short snippet. But in terms of from a professional athlete side or a football player, the ultimate goal is to win games, and on top of that, win the premiership. Do you view what's your definition of failure when it comes to playing sport?
Yeah, that's a really good definition of failure with sport. It's a interesting thing to think about. In truth, in our game, when you retired without winning a premiership, I must admit that still took me a number of years to get over, because you had these great lifelong friendships. You still do, but what really we all aspired to do was to win. And when you don't, and you work in our industry, there is this feeling. And I jumped straight into broadcasting the game. Part of what I did for the next 10 years was be in the winning rooms of a grand final, for every year. And you cross down inside the Hawthorn rooms, and here's Brian Lake, an old teammate of mine. He's just won his third premiership, and through gritted teeth, I'm going, congratulations, Lakey, very happy for you. But part of you's going, you fucking kidding me, aren't you? I wish that had been us. There was a jealousy part to that. I reckon that took me 6 or 7 years to fully get the jealousy part out that we hadn't achieved as a team. And then you get older and you go, God, we did our best. We've got these lifelong friendships. Yeah, it would have been fun to have a premiership reunion, not to be. You get a bit of perspective as you get older.
How do you, because sometimes, no judgment, I've done this, how sometimes people just can't get out of it. How did you, something click, conversation?
Yeah, I think it was just time. I remember just standing in the rooms one day admiring the guys that had won it. And probably for me, it was a bit more immediate because you're so, through working with Channel 7 and being in the rooms and being around and then again, the great privilege. How lucky are you to be working on grand final day? I tell you, the probably the full moment was when my side won it in 2016. It's only the second time, 62-year gap between the 1954 premiership. My dad played at the club, and then to be there on that day, grand final day, to watch, it was almost like we'd won it. There was no jealousy at all. It was total celebration. We had a brilliant night with so many players from our era and past eras. We ended up getting together on grand final. It was one of my favourite nights of my life, and it almost felt like all of this disappointment that we'd all had that hadn't won one, it was all gone, which was a good feeling.
But you also would have set up that flag, whether it's what you did previously or communications that you had or just the mark that you left on the club. Do you feel I know you're a humble guy, but do you feel like you helped contribute to the flag?
Well, I don't think, you know what, to be honest with you, on that night it did, and which is brilliant because, yeah, like I said, there's always that, you know, how good it would have been if it had been our era. But, you know, to a person we caught up with, it was just this joy that for me personally, you know, the club doctors I've known for 30 years, my grandma Nana Darcy lived till she was, 95. She went to all my dad's games and all my games, and I thought of her so much on that day. Luke Beveridge was the coach, who was a great teammate of ours. There were still guys playing that, we played, Bob Murphy's a great friend from my era, and that story on the day was, equal parts incredible and part tragic as well. So there's so much that was beyond you that you didn't feel, or you're glad that you felt pure joy and not, I wish that was us. And it felt like us. So perhaps that's the answer, is that we did feel in some way that we contributed.
It's a great way to let go. And, you talked about the 6-7 years of the pain or the hurt, and then to have that experience and to have it in literally like the Hollywood lights, to be with your friends and your family, that would just been a beautiful moment. But in terms of the failure side, so there's obviously the flag, but typically, let's say coaches, they're evaluated on win-loss. And it's very interesting because you might have a young team. You might not have the best list to get into the finals. The metric system could be, are my players improving? Are we getting along? Or there's so many different metrics. If you weren't winning games, was that a failure to you?
No, not necessarily. And I think that's part of the mindset that needs to change. Talking about our game, it's one team, on that metric has success every year. It's incredibly hard. 62-year gap between. Does that mean there was 61 years of failure? Of course there wasn't. There was incredible success. Our club has transformed itself from going out of existence a couple of times to having, a facility that's about to be worth $100 million to financial success, to membership growth, to all these great community programs they run. So, success is measured in many other ways. And you're right, there are so many variables. Sometimes it's the scoreboard when you're in the chair, that we, to be blunt about it, is what counts. But I still think sometimes, we miss the mark a little bit. Chris Scott's coaching the Cats at the moment. He's had the best winning percentage ever in the home and away season. And for whatever reason, people don't see the success in that. I find that such narrow and shallow thinking. Yeah, there's so many more examples. What he's done to get his side 9 of 12 years now in the top 4, having won one in his first year, is an incredible story of success. I really agree, because failure is such a loaded word, and we can typically just see it as binary. And it doesn't make any sense to me, because there's intangibles, like you've spoken about, the friendships, the development, the leadership opportunities. I think you're on the board, or just the people that you would have met, which has set you up for life, and also just mentally. That is a huge success. That motivates me. I don't even have that, but just hearing that, it's like contagious. So did you have to rechange your definition of success while you were playing? And then, well, you know what's interesting about that? To some of the conversations I had with guys that won it on that day, that were old teammates of mine, or even other players that have won a premiership. And sometimes this is actually even harder. Do you know what they say? It's not as good as you think.
Really?
And I think, what do you mean? They said, well, we've been told our whole life, you win a premiership, that's the ultimate, it's going to be unbelievable. It's like, do you know what? You go back to training a couple of weeks later and, you're back at home and you're either having a good day with your wife or you're not having. Yeah. It's not as though suddenly you've had this panacea for everything in your life that changes everything. Now, in some ways, that's a comforting thing to say. In other ways, it's even more frustrating when you hear it. But in perspective, as you get older, it's right. Would I have better friendships with the guys that I spent 14 years with? No, I don't think that would have changed that. Those friendships are lifelong and lasting. Yeah, we catch up, regularly, because we've got this great history together. Would have been enhanced. We would love nothing more than to have had that ultimate success in the game. But as you get older, you realise it doesn't define you in any way.
It's so interesting. Speaking to so many actors, and I could speak about this for ages, so I'll keep it short. The life of an actor, you can be on this big show or this big movie. Everyone sees you. You probably recorded a year or two before. You think like everything's going to, you think the world is just going to, people blow steam up your ass. It's the most amazing experience. But then the examples people give, you still need to go home and clean. you still need to go back and continue your job. Your relationship with your wife or husband or whoever is still the same. And yes, there's been an amazing achievement, but life still goes on. And we can't hold on to those successes and keep in the past. We can use it for a positive experience. But looking back and saying I did that once, that doesn't help anyone, does it?
Yeah, I agree. I think, and likewise, as you know, again, going back to your title, likewise with the failures, they're never that bad. And so somewhere in the middle is finding that balance around what makes you, happy and what makes you content and what, makes you thrive day to day. And I think, when some people get attached to one part of their life, that was the best moment of my life when I was an AFL footballer and I won premierships. It's like, well, that leaves you a little bit hollow. There's a lot of life after, playing sport for a living. So what else is next? What else do you do that lights you up in that same way? So, no, I agree with that for sure.
There's two things I want to say. When I've heard people, and I haven't been able to comprehend it, I've never said this out loud, where someone go, oh yeah, 2020 was a great year for me, or 2017 was a great year. I've always found that interesting because you're kind of, through my lens, setting yourself to fail or not succeed if you're constantly looking back at that one period of where you had that success. It just doesn't make sense to me looking in the past. I just don't think that's healthy.
Yeah, or too often looking too far into the future, isn't it? And I think, probably something I'm guilty of at times. You're looking forward to, geez, I can't wait till this project, works out and all the effort we've put in is going to come to fruition, and you either spend too much time doing that or too much time looking back at a patch that was a good time. What you understand really is the joys that you can have every day and to be thankful for. And I think there's a practice in that. It makes a lot of sense to you wake up. We live in this great city of Melbourne. I'm at your house today. I have a incredibly fulfilling day. I've got 4 healthy kids. I'm married to this incredible person that every day we we have your moments like anyone else, but you just feel it's not that hard to flick the switch to being grateful compared to what other people have to endure on a daily basis. So it's a practice. It takes a bit of time, but once you sort of operate in that space, you realise there's a fair bit more joy in doing that than worrying about the past or focusing too much on the future.
You said that a lot better than me, and I'm grateful for that. In terms of, so this is a topic which excites me probably the most out of all the topics in terms of like practices. And I know that you were a meditator when you first started out, which I find very interesting that sports clubs introduced meditation because it was seen as a bit wishy-washy. And now you host a wellness show. I think you have a Ayurvedic spa and retreat. You do a whole bunch of stuff. How did you get into that?
I think coming out of playing sport for a living and effectively being fit for a living, you got an appreciation for, and I didn't really understand it too. David Smorgon was the president at the time, and he introduced that program, and it wasn't for everyone in the western suburbs of Melbourne in the late 90s to try meditation. And I really didn't even understand what it was doing for me until I finished playing. And it was my wife. I stopped doing it. The second I finished playing, I just stopped doing it like a lot of things, ice baths and other things, because it was a footy related thing. And she was like, "You've turned into a nightmare." And I was putting it down to, it's a change of life. And you are, your hard work around the kids, seriously. You need to go back to doing that thing you used to do. And that was when I really started to understand it more and realise having that daily practice of meditating was a gift for much more than just playing footy. That was helping me in so many other areas of my life. And that's when I really wanted to delve back into it. And our, the health retreat in Bali has been amazing for our kids to have access to that and grow up with that sort of knowledge. So just one thing flowed to another. And I married a yoga teacher, Pilates instructor, and meditation. So cool. She's pretty attuned to that space as well. So I think it's been a really fortunate part of our life.
I don't like talking too much about spouses, but was she always in that space, or did she develop that with you?
She was doing musical theatre when I first met her, so had a performing background and had just finished. And when we first got together, she used to start a personal training business in Pilates focus. So she certainly has that DNA, and that's really flowed through to our family and our kids, which is awesome.
You mentioned Wim Hof. You mentioned ice baths. You should get Wim Hof on your podcast because he's an interesting
I had
leader.
the great pleasure of spending 3 hours with Wim in a random way a few years ago, and it was one of the best days that I've had. A friend of mine was in the Austrian Alps, one of my Austrian Alps with the Wim Hof, one of my old teammates who I love catching up with because you ring him, he's doing something crazy. He said, mate, where are you? I'm in my board shorts and I'm hiking through the Austrian Alps. It's -20. I said, what? I'd never heard of Wim Hof. He said, mate, look him up. It's incredible. And then a friend said, totally randomly, this guy called Wim Hof is here in Port Melbourne. We want to film him. Will you come down and do an interview? And I said, yes, absolutely. And he had set up this personal training. He had the ice bars set up, and it was supposed to be 20 minutes. We ended up spending 3.5 hours, and I used to hate the ice bars when I was playing. I got in such a zone after. What an incredible guy! What a great story. He had his daughter with him, and profound impact on my thinking. He's incredible.
Oh, I remember I did a Wim Hof workshop ages ago. I've only done the one ice bath. Instead of saying I should have, I need to do that because I had an out-of-body experience doing the first one. I just went into a trance. I was seeing colours. I was gone. There was no such thing as time and space. It was like I've never done it, but it felt like an acid trip or something. It was and you come out just energized and feel incredible.
Yeah, if you look at the studies that have been done, I mean, he's sort of described as the Austrian extreme athlete, but those who know his background understand he was coming from a great place of sadness with his wife committing suicide, and that was his way to find calm. And they've hooked him up to machines. You would have seen that study. They had 11 people. They inject a virus into everyone. Just through controlling your breathing, he's able to not feel any of the effects. 11 other people next to him get sick. He doesn't. So what's going on there? His view is that the autonomous nervous system is not actually that you can switch that on. Now, that's pretty profound if you actually believe that he's proven that that's the case.
He's done it time after time. But they tried to label it as, what was he, like a superhuman or like a gift of God, or just they don't understand it. And I find that really frustrating because I've been in this space for quite some time, and I'm sure you've dabbled in different things where it's seen as a bit wishy-washy. Also coming from a footy industry as well, I think when you first started radio, you were told, they asked you what your interests were and you said meditation or something like that. Like, no, you can't talk about that here.
No, I remember that conversation very well. Whatever you do, don't mention meditating on Triple M. Our audience will switch off in droves. And I sort of laughed. I said, well, you hired me. If it comes up, I'll be authentic. I'll be myself, and let's see what happens. But big male-dominated audience, the truck drivers and the tradies would ring in and say, hey, I'm feeling shit. I want to feel better. You're open-minded to that. Tell us a bit more about it. So, I think that world's changed for the better now. My wife used to say when I first we'd be at a dinner party, and she's like, it sounds like you're selling Amway. You're telling people about meditation all the time. And I'm like, seriously, I've got, apart from wanting other people to have a good experience. And so I had to dial it down a little bit. But, I think it's something that now is so much more accepted than it was 20 years ago when I first found it.
Agreed. It sounds like that stuff doesn't really bother you because I know, like, typically we've had other guests, Broden Kelly, for example. I think it was Broden from Auntie Donna, for those that know. He was quite into I wouldn't say in this space, but like aware of his emotions and having those conversations. But in his footy side, it was just, you don't talk about that stuff. It's about playing footy. And he found that an interesting kind of different side. Did you have that? Or you just didn't care? You're authentic. This is who I am.
Oh, you have your moments. I mean, I still do radio, and there's a big chance some of this will be cut up and replayed back at my expense. But that's my sense of humour. Yeah. I find that funny. And look, great. The banter of the locker room, I love. People think we get that over the top, and for others that haven't been in there, we get together with our mates and it's on, and if you're an outsider coming in, you go, geez, that's ruthless and a bit over the top. Most of the time, I think it's delivered with a lot of love. And so when you understand that, when we're doing radio and we're really mucking around down at the shallow end, to use a Mick Malloy term, and really trying to just take the piss out of each other, that's my sense of humour. Yeah. I find that funny. So I got no problem. They know my passion for meditation. They know about the retreat in Bali. They love hanging shit on me for the House of Wellness. So I find that funny. I don't find that, because they're my interests. They're the things that I like doing. So if you haven't got a sense of humour about that, then you're probably in a bit of trouble.
Exactly. So what is you can dive into as deep as you want. What does your practice look like if you have a daily one or things that you do throughout the week.
So that has stuck with me now, the meditation, start almost every day with it. Yeah, would be every day, twice a day.
Morning and night?
Morning and night, morning and afternoon, which is, again, a bit of a gift, to slow the world down. I mentioned Beck as a yoga instructor. She's passed a bit of that on to me. So I've got about a half an hour routine, which is very, very basic. But as I've got older, I feel like it keeps me going. This, again, it's pretty lightweight. Her and I, we walk. That's our thing. We go for walks every day, often twice a day, with our dog, Dennis.
Oh, beautiful.
So I love that time. People who live around us see us out all the time, and with 4 kids, it's just a chance to sort of spend some time together. So my exercise routine's fairly lightweight. I need to, when I occasionally get back into the gym a little bit more, but I'm pretty consistent on those things, that I don't really compromise too much on at least doing those things every day, and occasionally I'll add in a bit more robust exercise. What
has surprised you the most? Because when I've gone into this industry, you see some crazy stuff, which maybe we'll get into. Is there any modality? Because you do, it's Ayurvedic medicine. My mum studied that, and if I would have heard about it a few years ago, I don't know how I would have felt. Now it's so obvious. So were there any things that really shook you? Because I was very stubborn. I'm still a skeptic, and I'm in this space.
Yeah, so am I, to be honest with you. And again, same with meditation. I'm a big, one of the studies in mantra-based meditation is that 20 minutes is the equivalent of 4 hours deep of sleep. Now, I'm bullshit.
Yeah, that's the one.
Good luck with that until you actually experience it, and then you do it enough times, and you stop doing it, and you go, breakfast radio, I could have slept in those extra 20 minutes, and I did sometimes, and I felt 100% worse than getting up. And Jerry Seinfeld, is a lifelong meditator, and he's that, it took him ages to get the morning one. He said, I've just been asleep. Why do I need to get up and close my eyes again? But he describes it as, putting the, like the iPhone charger in and just getting this turbocharge of energy. And so if you believe in, and I don't think you have to believe it, I think you have to experience it. And when you do, it becomes hard to ignore. And then an extension of that, having an Ayurvedic health retreat, I remember sitting down with my accountant and said, I'm going to become a partner in an Ayurvedic meditation retreat in Bali. And he said, mate, I spend my lifetime trying to get idiot footballers out of investments like this.
Oh, really?
What are you doing, man? This is the dumbest idea I've ever heard. And, it's been a great 10 or 11 years. Feel really privileged to be part of that. And it's had a great – and it taught me a lot, it's, again, about eating well and about, really for a couple of thousand years, Ayurveda, for those that it was really – prominent through the East. They took time out regularly around preventative health. They understood that, you should press pause and stop and, work on your, digestion. It's actually a beautiful thing to do. Understand eating specifically around your body type, really intricate, integrated and intricate system of health. And it's also very aligned with Western medicine. It's not as though you're abandoning all of the modalities in that space as well. But I think we've probably forgotten a fair bit about some of the things that went on for thousands of years that worked really well. So, again, you sort of feel a bit open-minded, more out of luck than probably by design.
I like the key word you said is preventative, because that is a concept when you speak to someone for the first time, no idea what it means. Just, what do you mean? You can do things to make you, you've spoken about walks. So I don't know if you know anything about the Czech Institute. Paul Czech is a genius in my mind, but I think there's 7 pillars of health. Breathing, I'm going to butcher this, diet, positive thinking.
There'll be relationships, I'm sure will be part of that, healthy and constructive relationships.
Movement, eating, / nutrition, sleep is crucial. We don't really talk about that. The right times at certain cycles, like 10 to 2, is, I think, physical repair, and someone like me goes to bed too late. There's all these other things, and working together, if you apply all 7, your chances of diseases get reduced by 1,000%. But you have to do all of them, and that's the challenge.
Yeah, you look at the studies that have been done on the blue zones. There's a great guy that my wife just got me to follow, Dan Butner, I think his name is recently. He's done all the great studies on Okinawa in Japan, where they routinely live to 110 or 115, and I'll butcher this as well, but communities in Sicily where and again, those common themes are just there. Around outside, their diet was always nutrient rich and, 80% vegetables and fresh fish and clean food. But it was community really is the key, that they support each other really well. Okinawa, in their late 90s, working in the rice fields still every day, super strong, super healthy. I think tragically that part of the world, has become westernised and McDonald'sized, and we're not seeing those same life extensions. So they're not complex. They're not, and I don't think anyone thinks that any of those things aren't smart.
Yep.
It's just, are you able to put them into your daily routine? Getting out and getting some sunlight. I sound like I'm on the pulpit here.
How much Amway do I need to buy?
Well, that's right. I know. It's. I still love having a beer. I still, love having a crack. To me, the 80-20 rule is probably the best. 80% of the time, you try and do your best, and 20% of the time, there's fun in that. And if you study those zones, they're exactly the same way. I mean, if you're so intense about it, there's no joy in that. You need to be able to let go every now and then.
And that comes into one of the pillars is how your mindset or your belief systems. And, I read this one study, I'm going to butcher it, but essentially I think if you ate a McDonald's meal with your family and you're loving it, you're laughing, you can actually digest it better than normal. And that is mind-blowing. There's so many things I've read which you say on the outset, and like, nah, there's no way. And I'm like, sometimes you just have to experience it.
I think the French are like that, aren't they? There's, different areas have those meals delivered with, they're often high in fat and cream, and they eat everything they want, but they eat it proportionately. They never overindulge. They drink, with most meals in Europe, but they never overindulge, and they're done around those community tables that are so much fun and so much. And so you go and if you have the privilege of being over there and you see 3 generations all dining together, that's evolved over hundreds and hundreds of years. And you're right, that has to have an impact on. They take time out, to eat properly and slowly. They're not on the run. There's a few, simple ideas that we've forgotten about, I think.
Is there, last thing on that, is there anything that's kind of surprised you about being in this space? Anything that you've learned that's been, I'm sure there's like 1,000 things, but one thing that spring to mind where you're like, this has changed my life, or has it been a consistent practice for the years?
Look, it's a good question. I mean, I think being open-minded, I mean, I also understand there is quackery out there as well. And, I remember having a great conversation with the late Jim Steins, who was just an incredible
Did he do Reach?
Irish Australian, founded the Reach Foundation, won a Brownlow medal from Ireland. An incredible person, an incredible healer. He's played the most consecutive games in a row, Jimmy. He would have 6 broken ribs, and he'd have, his Celtic healing, smoke ceremony, and suddenly he'd come out and you can't play with 6 broken. Jimmy could, and when he got his cancer, he said to me once, he said, mate, I'm healing myself and they're making me worse, and he felt like he didn't, have the support that he wanted to do to try, and he said, I just need to know what it is, and then I'm going to be able to heal myself correctly. And I look back at Jimmy, but he did some crazy stuff. I'm not talking out of school. It was great to see his beautiful kids, Tiernan and Matisse. Tiernan's just been drafted to college basketball. I saw recently, which is great, and I've seen his kids from a slight distance over recent years. Jimmy being incredibly proud, but I just saw that was someone who knew intuitively how to heal himself. That you're going to have some moments where you're doing something that's probably a bit out of whack. He felt like he just needed more time, and tragically we lost him too young. But yeah, I think those things that make sense that we're talking about before. As soon as your health's gone, everyone would do anything they could to get it back. So to chip away at that consistently seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do.
I agree. And you've mentioned intuition and gut. Is that something that I'm sure when you're playing footy, it's one thing that you have to be quite intuitive. But outside of footy, is that a concept you're aware of?
100%. I think all the times that you've made bad decisions, where you got into a bad business partnership, or you've aligned yourself with something, and you look back and you think it's the times that you didn't go with your gut instinct. And I think that happens for reasons, isn't it? And on the podcast that I record, I've been lucky enough to speak to a lot of leaders, and they talk a lot about, if I think about the best decisions I made, it was really when intuitively I knew that was the right person to hire, that was the right business to buy into, that was the right partner to take on board. So I think, we get distracted sometimes, but when we get back into that, it's normally a good thing.
Very interesting. So I reckon a good way to wrap up the podcast will do a rapid fire segment, even though they're not so rapid fire and you can take your time to think about it. Ready?
I'm ready.
Biggest pet peeve?
I think people who aren't honest, people who are a little bit liberal with the truth.
Or can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think it's a pretty basic value, isn't it? If you're around, you're allowed to make mistakes, you're allowed to get things wrong. No problems. I do that all the time, but I think you want to be honest about the mistakes you make and put your hand up. I find that category of people the hardest to deal with.
And I would also, I'm not going to comment on any of them after this because I'll derail them, but I would also imagine when you come from a system from AFL where feedback's right between the eyes, and then you're seeing people that don't apply that value.
It was very hard to transition out of that in AFL for that exact reason, is that you realise in the corporate world sometimes that's uncommon.
I've said that as well. And please correct my butchering of this word. What's a leader?
A leader is a great passion of mine. Started with one of my oldest friends, Matt Waterwitz. We work in the leadership world. We started in education, putting educators through a cycle of learning. And now we have this great privilege, Michael, of collaborating with a whole range of leaders from sport and industry and the arts and social venture. And we bring them together in these groups that we're really passionate about. To name drop for a moment, Michael, we've been fascinated to have coaches from elite sporting environments around the world. Ange Postecoglou, who just won Celtic, and Eddie Jones, with some of our local AFL coaches, Luke Beveridge and Craig McRae and John Aloisi, and then legends from other areas are joining our programs. Andy Lee has been a great supporter of ours, and then every day people who want to actually use these forums, a Leader Connect, we call it, Michael. Appreciate you giving me the chance to talk about it, because we're really passionate about the idea that you meet people where you're at and you support each other. And so, we're having a lot of fun building that out. And so if you're interested, we'd love to hear from you.
And explain meet people where you're at. Another topic, we've skimmed through so many topics. We're going to have to do part 10s, but meet people where you're at. What does that mean?
So it means to me, very few people can understand what it's like for an AFL coach at a press conference to getting hammered, in real time, post a loss. You've got your nervous system in overdrive. But other coaches from other codes and other sports internationally can really relate to that, because they're in the arena. They're living that every day. So they have got a great perspective to be able to walk shoulder to shoulder with you, but also challenge your thinking as well. And so you don't have to come from the same discipline. Ben Northey is, part of the Australian Symphony Orchestra, who's in one of the groups that we've curated with Michael Voss, who's the coach at Carlton, and couldn't be more diverse backgrounds. But how does Ben conduct an orchestra in Spain when he doesn't speak Spanish? How does he lead that group? And I'm assuming I know nothing about it, but if you miss a beat, I'm assuming that's not great. But you can't speak the language. What are the leadership clues that you can match that relate to trying to lead a group of athletes or sports people? And so that's where we see the real amazing connections are coming. So, but you need someone who's meeting you where you're at, to me, is someone who can really understand what it's like to walk in the shoes that you are. They don't have to be in the same area, but they've got a sense of what that's about.
That was very well said. What do you do to reduce your stress? We've spoken about a few things, but is there any one thing that, besides meditation and walking, that you have?
Well, I think they're probably the two things that do it. I think it's just allocating that time to slow down, to not get too crazy. I think when you work in media, people often say, geez, you're busy, because they see you at work and they assume that's where you are all the time. I do my best to not be anything like that, and that's just clearing space and saying, I could have got 8 more things done today, but taking the time, to stop and get up, exercise, go for a walk with Beck, they're the things that keep me de-stressed as often as I can. And when you get that balance right, I think you invariably feel better.
What gets you out of bed?
I sense a purpose, Michael, and I mentioned it before. I've been lucky enough to work in a couple of different areas, playing sport for a living in media, but this idea that we can share great leadership, we can collaborate with great leaders around the world, and whether you're working, in the domain that you are and what you're trying to create, or whether you're working, as an educator or you're an elite coach of a sporting team, we feel like there's these traits that are worth sharing around great leadership. And so that gets me out of bed, the idea that we can tell those stories better, collaborate with great leaders and share that message is a really purpose-driven thing.
I really feel that, and this is the question I was going to ask before. Someone asked me this question many years ago, and I was so taken aback, and I actually didn't have an answer, and I still think about it to this day. And this was in alignment with what I've been doing on this podcast and some of the studies I've done before. And the question was, why do you want to help people? And so many things came up, but I didn't have quite a great answer. And so typically, you can see someone who's very successful and a lot of money, they're doing well in their field. Why do they need to look out for someone else? So someone like you is at the peak of success in so many different fields. How would you answer that question?
That's a great question. I think, pretty lonely without doing it. I'm a team sport person. I'm a collaborative person. I all the joy comes from doing something to me alongside, other people that you generally care about and how you impact them in a positive way. And that doesn't always work out. Sometimes, you're not aligned in values, and that's happened to me, a number of times where, it's time to move on because you just can't get that alignment. But when you get that sweet spot, I spoke, about my old friend Matt, who we founded Aleda with. It is just joyful to pick up the phone and say, mate, you're not going to believe it. We've got this NBA coach who's going to join one of our pro. You're not going to believe, today I caught up and I learnt this from chatting with Michael. And it just feels like that sharing economy, impacting people positively is just it's the thing that I love more than anything else. And you try and seek it out.
Sharing economy, that is a word I'm going to add to my vocabulary because that's exactly right. You mentioned not being aligned with potentially other people. As a captain, you probably have to deal with the board. You have to deal with the coaches. You have to deal with maybe some teammates that you don't like. And you're probably told this is the message. How did you deal when you felt you weren't in alignment with the messaging across boards?
Work in progress, that one for me, Michael. Some that know me will say not that well. And I think there's a fair bit of mirror up for me. I think, probably coming out of for football, a little bit too combatively sometimes. That you're used to that direct feedback. And I had to retrain myself. You'd be in radio. I know you had Will Anderson as a guest on this, and Will and I have got a long history of friendship, but robust, and suddenly it's like, mate, you need to calm down. You don't need to fight that fight. Someone I felt had said something out of integrity. I want to go and challenge them and say, hey, that's not cool. And as you get older, you go, geez, maybe you can do that a little bit more sensitively. Still work in progress. I think sometimes I do overstep the mark on that one. And I look at people, I admire people who are much more tactful in it. I think I'm getting slightly better, but at times I need a bit more tact.
I like the self-reflection. And this is a bit of a different one. Would you consider going into politics?
No.
Absolutely no?
Absolutely no.
And why?
Well, I think for a start, I just couldn't imagine anything more mind-numbing or more... less joyful, and I mean that. I just and I don't think it's a skill set that I've got either. By the way, I mean I've had again, it's the mainstream media, sort of taking the piss that's turned into this sort of serious discussion. And it's born out of a conversation. I live a couple of doors down from our former federal treasurer Josh Frydenberg, who a couple of streets away, who I've had a friendship with and I've got great respect for. And so in some of those conversations, and it's a small world, in these circles, you're lucky enough also to have, a mutual friend who's very close with Peter Dutton, as it turns out, who I've, again, it's a small world. Doing the radio show with Eddie, we got to meet every Prime Minister and every influential politician. So you got this opportunity to meet a lot of those guys. So I think, if anything, that cemented the fact that it wouldn't have been for me. But there seems to be this rumour that's going to be the case. But no.
That's so interesting. And also I like how you've had the opportunity to spend time with so many of these people. And look, I'm sure the character that they present is very different. I'm not having a go at all the politicians, but it's so interesting that you spend more time than the average person and you don't want to go near that.
Well, you just look at it and you think, if you've got the compulsion, we should celebrate the guys that put their hand up. It's easy to be critical, and I do this from time to time. We all do, and we go, that's disgraceful. Can't believe that you've made that decision. It's like, well, go and do it yourself and then see how you go. And I know that I wouldn't have the temperament, the skill set, or, the willingness to do it. So, it is easy to be critical. It's harder to go and do it yourself.
And we don't actually talk about politics on this podcast, but what we do discuss is finding the truth. And we talk about authenticity and something which I'm not sure you realize the degree. I know there was a lot of media storm, but when you challenged, let's say the word challenged the Premier, a lot of media stories went with that. And I'm sure there was a lot of mislabeling, or I don't even know. I only actually found out about that now. To many people, it was so... To me, this is one of the many reasons I want you on the podcast. Whether I agree with you or not, and I do agree with what you were saying, when someone can put their hand up and ask questions, when it's a very hard environment and there's a lot of fear, you talked about cancel culture and you could potentially lose your job and you can be labelled as so many things. I found it so empowering that you put your hand up, you're very well researched and you spoke about it, or you spoke about many different topics. How did you deal with the media storm? Because you didn't really say anything. You were just, these are the facts, and ask great questions.
Yeah, that was a fascinating experience, because anyone who'd listened to our show in the preceding 10 years or, certainly preceding 12 months would have known that they were exactly the questions that I was going to ask. I was asking him on the show, and Daniel Andrews, in fairness, he'd been into our studio, had to have been 20 times before that day. And so we're living in Melbourne. Lockdown was underway. It was, as it turned out, the longest lockdown in the world. And so it felt like, for the first time ever, there wasn't an opportunity to debate things. When your kids are away from school for, as it turns out, close to 2 years, that to me is a topic that everyone should debate. Now, that might have been the only outcome and the correct one. I'm not pretending to have the answers on all of that. When you are, confined into your home in a 9 p.m. curfew, that should take some debate. When the playgrounds are being wrapped up in police tape for kids not to be able to use them, we should probably have a conversation about it. It felt like, for the first time, if you did dare to even ask questions about that, you were an anti-vaxxer, I was being accused of. It's like, yeah, okay, I'm not sure where that came from. Or, come and join Sky News because you... So the amount of... people wanted you to be in one camp or the other and say, right, you're part of our team now because you asked those questions, or you're, come and join Pete Evans in Byron Bay. I was getting both sides and I was like, that wasn't the intention. It was, we should be having conversations about this. And the reaction to it was just so extreme. And I still have this question around the robustness of the journos and why there wasn't more debate. We understood at the time, I'm not getting political, but, there's a medical advice, and now it's not. So what was it at the time? And are we going to learn from those? Maybe if you do a proper review of it, maybe that was the best you could possibly do. If that's the case, then we should learn from it. If you can't debate it and you can't ask questions and you've got a microphone and someone's in front of you, then we're in trouble.
Yeah, and I think that's what a lot of people felt as well. Good questions lead to good answers. And let's just say you were wrong, even though you were just asking questions. You ask such good questions that can lead to a better response. And I find that in all areas of life, if you can't ask anything, then you're really going to... There's many different ways to roam.
Yeah, and that's what's been amazing. We've lived through this year. We've had this incredibly blessed life, all of us. We haven't lived through world wars. We haven't had to be conscripted anywhere. If you've lived in Australia, you've had this incredible boom period and you feel really grateful. And so you're probably due for a challenge, let's be honest. But it doesn't mean that in that time, I thought Melbourne became a really tough city. I felt for the police. They were put in a situation where there were some horrible images of our police in Melbourne. We know they're doing their job and great people. And the image of what Melbourne looked like overseas was I thought, hard to come back from, and not a lot of debate around things that we should have the most debate about. Whether you agree or disagree, a lot changed in those 2 years. I didn't think there were forums. And credit, Eddie and I were coming from, Eddie McGuire and I doing the breakfast show, we probably come from very different positions. That's what I love about working with him. You can go toe-to-toe, and we did, on all these things, morning after morning, but there was never a moment where you went, we're going to lose a friendship over this.
I think that's essential.
That's what it's all about, isn't it? I feel like that art's being lost now. Is like, if you disagree with me, I want you cancelled, or I'm not inviting you back again. It's like, surely we're better than that.
I agree, and I have friends. I don't associate with either side of politics. It depends on the issue, and it's interesting to just see other people. Now, my relationships are, I don't agree with you, I love you, I hear what you're saying, and you move forward, and that's how we rise up. That's the key to the world's success in my mind.
I agree. I think it's been lost. I think now we're scared of, if you're so adamant in your view, get on and debate it and educate people. Don't mandate a thing. Again, I'll get in trouble for even saying that. I think education rather than legislation is probably the way to go for mine.
I 100% agree with you. I forgot we were doing a rapid fire, so we'll do the last few before we wrap up. What's been the most embarrassing thing to happen to you, either playing footy or being live?
Geez, that's an interesting question. There's so many. I don't know how to rapid fire that one. I realise, probably my mind goes to working with professional comedians, and lucky enough to have done that over a long period. You realise they were always 3 laps ahead of me, and I love it because I became cannon fodder for most of their material, and it took me a long while to work out. Just be careful what you share with them off air, because you know that. They're too good at it, they're professionals, and so the ex-AFL player was just a perfect target for, and I loved it because that's my sense of humour in lots of ways. So they were particularly good. Will Anderson and Mick, who I spent a lot of time with over the journey. Look, I had lots of. There's a story. I know we're running out of time, but my 3rd ever AFL game, I'll never forget. The runner came out and said, we're playing against Hawthorn. I think. And he had a great knack of actually, most runners toned down the coach's message. It was coming from Terry Wallace. He used to add 25%. And he said, mate, I think you're playing the worst AFL game in history.
Wow.
So much so, and he was laughing as he says it, we're actually going to leave you on to see if it can get any worse. And my opponent at the time was Chris Langford, legendary Hawthorn player, incredible. I was playing my 3rd game, and he was laughing, because he was beating me so badly. That stayed with me for a while. I thought, geez, that's going to be a very short AFL.
Why
AFL
would he say
group,
that?
Because it was true. For a start, it was very close to being true. But I had a teammate, Tony Liberatore, at the time, who was just one of the angriest, most competitive players who came and got in the middle of that conversation. It was a good learning experience, put it that way.
And why did you say the runners toned down the messages from the coaches?
Because normally, in our era, if they repeated what they said, you mightn't come back from it. So it was normally sort of take 25% off. Our runner at the time, Chris Burton, he was a ripper, played for Richmond and the Bulldogs. He had his own take on from my experience, and he used to like to add his own little twist. Normally they do you the dignity of actually sort of whispering it so that your opponent didn't hear. That wasn't Burt's style. He liked to let everyone know just how bad you were going, and I was going really bad, so it was a good lesson.
Oh, that's amazing. What would you do if you could change anything in your life? What would it be?
I know this again sounds pretty arrogant. Probably nothing. I think I've just been really lucky. Grew up in a great family, incredible parents. Lost my father about sort of 2 years ago, but he couldn't have had close to 2 years ago to today, actually, and couldn't have had a better influence in my life. And my beautiful mum, still alive and well. My extended family were really close, and I've got 4, beautiful, healthy, happy kids, and an incredible partner in Beck. So you sort of feel like you won the lottery in all that. Plenty of hurdles and failures and shortcomings along the way, but I just feel like I've been incredibly lucky.
I think that's a great answer, and it's not arrogant at all. And what if you could change anything in the world? What would it be?
I think the world's become a little extreme and concerning, and a little bit negative. And I try and think the other way and focus on it. But you sort of look at you go, imagine sitting in Ukraine right now, or what's still happening in parts of the world. You go, really, are we still at that level where when you think about it, you all share without getting too world peace about all this. It feels like the beauty queen answer I'm going to give you here, but it feels as though if we can, in our own small part, if you pass on something positive, there's a massive opportunity to do something positive to someone every single day, in the way you interact, and when you buy your coffee, and when you bump into someone on the street, or you get an email to send back to someone, or an old friend you haven't spoken to for a while, or the way you interact with your kids. If you had a bad day before, put your hand up and say sorry. So to me, sharing that opportunity, we're not all going to do something massive that's going to change the course of human history, but I think if we all do something, taking that positive edge, I just feel like there is the glass half full. That's probably been the way I've tried to look at things, and I feel pretty lucky on that basis.
Great answer. What would you do if you knew you could not fail?
Geez, that's a good question. If I do what we're trying to do right now with Aleda, it's an incredible passion. I know we already are failing, we already are making mistakes, but you get older and that's just part of it. It's really enjoyable and exciting to see that. Probably adding on to the answer that we are, if we can magnify that through great examples of leadership, share what great leadership looks like, bring people together in groups. It'd be nice to jump to the sustained success part. We always want to do that, but I think you miss out along the way around the knockbacks and the hurdles and the frustrations. That's, you get older and you realise that's just as much a part of the joy as getting there in the end.
I agree. Any advice you want to give someone who wants to try something different or new, but perhaps a bit fearful of doing so?
100% go for it. 100% have a go. All the people I speak to, the leaders we talk to, all of them take that leap of faith. You want to be smart. You don't want to, put everything you've got on Bitcoin and ride that one into the sunset. It may be the best thing that ever happens to you. I'm not judgmental in that space either, but you want to do it knowing that at the end of the day, what's the worst thing that can happen? You go back and you start again. You've got enough opportunity to rebuild. So I think if it's what you feel like you should be doing, your guts tell you just go and have a crack. I'm trying to advise myself as I'm speaking.
If you could go back into a time when you first started out, would you give yourself advice, and what would you say?
You turn up a bit better prepared, Michael, than I did. I look back and think, 17, I wanted to play AFL football for a living. I lobbed in Melbourne from the airport. They drove me to the famous tan track in Melbourne. I'd never heard of it. We had a 2-lap time trial, and halfway up the first hill, I was in a world of pain. I'd gone to schoolies week. How what a great decision that was. Catch up with my mates and then lob into Melbourne and expect everything's going to turn out right. So, miracle. I'll never forget my teammate going up the hill first time. Rowan Smith, 300-game legend. Still a great old mate. He looked at me and said, "You are in a world of pain, young man," and he was right.
Brilliant. This is the last question before I ask how people can follow you, keep up to date with you. What is the one question I should have asked you?
I think you've done an outstanding job. You do a better job than I do, mate. Look, I'm self-conscious enough to know that I think I've given you longer answers than was probably probably required. But mate, I'm appreciative. I know this format is clearly something you're passionate about. I love. It's the most enjoyable thing I've done in media is to start the podcast that I'm recording. I love it. I feel like every time I sit down with someone, I learn a bit. So when someone reaches out, as you did to me, I feel really honoured that you would be prepared to listen to my stuff. So thanks for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. And just so you know, and we're going to end it right now, but the way you're a very well-spoken man. And I love that you add layers. You're a very well-spoken guy, and you've obviously had training in this field, but you are the reason I do this podcast. So I'm very appreciative, and thank you so much for coming on.
Very kind. No training, but it's just time, isn't it? And time behind, chatting to interesting people. So thanks for the opportunity.
Awesome. Luke talks passionately about leadership and the concept of meeting someone where they're at. That is, to really understand what it's like to walk in another person's shoes, to apply non-judgment and meet them with empathy and compassion. As Tom Epperson says, it's about giving to others what they need when they need it. My take is, instead of judging or applying a set of beliefs and dogmas when speaking to another, try to listen deeply, hear them, see them, and ask open and honest questions. It's hard not to decide what is best for another, but that is the goal. That is, be open to their ideas and opinions. That is where the real growth lies. So I'll leave you with this epic quote by Harsha Pereira. If you try to recognize where people are and become open to meeting them there, wherever that may be, then you have the chance to go beyond together.
Thank you for listening to the Funny and Failure podcast, exploring the deeper side of comedy.